So as we are now approaching the end of the season, plenty of players in the Championship will be out of contract at the end of the season. And so in today's video, we're going to be picking out one player from each Championship club who you should be doing everything to tie down to a new contract extension. I'd be interested to know from you guys who from your club who has an expiring contract would you be keen on keeping around for next season. But without any further ado, let's jump in. Wigan Athletic, Will Keane. Now Wigan are likely to have quite the squad overhaul in the summer because of some of the behind the scenes issues if they are to be relegated to League One this year as well. But one player with an expiring contract who I especially think they should be looking to keep around is Will Keane. I accept that he has had his frustrating times and inconsistencies throughout this season, but 10 goals in the Championship for a Wigan side who haven't been great in terms of the creative numbers certainly shouldn't be sniffed at, and considering he scored 26 goals in their promotion campaign from League One last year, he knows how to find the back of the net, especially in League One. Blackpool, I'm going to go with Jordan Thorniley. There were a few players that I could have picked out, but they've got quite a few expiring at the end of the season, and of those who I could see them realistically renewing, Thorniley is a player who I'd imagine Blackpool fans would be more than keen to keep around. Once again, in a similar vein to Wigan, with League One looking like the likely destination, thinking about a spine of players who they could build that side around, I certainly think that Thorniley would be a really good asset for them in that sense. Huddersfield Town, has Josh KOROMA now gone ahead and done enough to earn a new contract extension? He's a little bit of a funny one really, because he had that brilliant season when he first burst onto the scene, and from that point his progression at the club has sort of plateaued out, and obviously had that loan spell away as well, but more recently was on the score sheet for them in that game against Middlesbrough, and that really served as a reminder of how good he can be when he is at his best. But 24 years old now, I'd be interested to know from some Huddersfield fans, would you be looking to extend that contract? Cardiff City, I'd probably be looking at Mark Harris more so than some of the other players who they've got expiring at the end of the season. Wouldn't be that fussed about Connor Wickham, for example, at this stage, but Harris is a player who can play in a variety of positions across the forward line. He's chipped in with 3 goals this season and wouldn't be a player who takes up a massive wage either. With Rotherham, the obvious shout would be Chidozie Ogbene. He scored 7 goals, got 3 assists this season. Rapid, can play in a number of positions as well, but does seem a little bit maybe outlandish that he does sign a contract extension with Rotherham with the variety of clubs who have already been linked with him, both in January and clubs who are expected to be in for him in the summer window as well. Another player who I'm sure Rotherham will be keen on tying down, Ben Wiles, who I believe is also out of contract at the end of the season. With QPR, Chris Willock is the obvious one, but the club does have the option to extend his deal by another year, which I'm sure will be triggered, and then his future I suppose is up in the air whether or not they look to cash in on him at that point. Of the other players who they've got out of contract at the end of the season, I'm not sure they'll be doing all they can to extend those deals. Amos is one that I'm interested to keep an eye on, because when fit I think definitely adds something to that midfield, but just his injury record recently has meant he's been unreliable to count on. Lucas Jout is the obvious one at Reading, but I don't think anyone can see him extending his contract there. He will get a move in the summer. In terms of a more realistic option, Yaku Mete is also out of contract at the end of the season, and in maybe a similar boat to Jout, albeit maybe there won't be as much interest in him, so I'm interested to see particularly what's the current Reading fan base verdict on Mete and whether or not a new contract for him would be likely or not. When it comes to Hull City, I believe that Callum is the only player that they've got fully out of contract at the end of the season. There are a few other players who do have their deals running down, but the club does hold a 1-year extension in those players. So right now, Elder is the only sort of one with a question mark over his future at the club. I'd be interested to know from some Hull fans whether you would get that new deal done for him. Birmingham, Maxime Collins, an interesting one. He's been a consistent performer for Blues over these last few years. I imagine that wages would be a bit of a stumbling block in negotiating a new contract, but if he was willing to take a cut on the deal that he's currently on, I could definitely see Birmingham having some value in extending his deal. A few other players who are out of contract at the end of the season worth considering. Troy Deeney, definitely someone who I'd like to get Blues fans' perspectives on. Would you like to see him around for next season as well? Has he shown enough throughout this year? Swansea City, Ryan Manning. Now it does seem as if Manning is more than likely to be leaving Swansea at the end of the season, as the club offered him a fresh contract in December, which was rejected on the players' side. It doesn't seem as if Swansea are willing to budge up any more on the offer that they did put in for him. Now, Manning has been probably one of the best fullbacks, wing-backs in the Championship this season. The numbers back that up. He had a great performance in the South Wales derby at the weekend as well. It would be a massive shame from a Swansea perspective, I think, to see him being moved on. Bristol City have a few contract extensions to consider. I believe they have an option for a further year with Zach Viner, but when it comes to Jay De Silva and Thomas Callas, there are options to be had with what to do with each of them. In terms of De Silva, he was linked with a move away in the January window. I remember Coventry in particular being interested in him. And Callas is a player who has really struggled for fitness, but at his best is a very good Championship defender, and that's the issue Bristol City are probably negotiating with Callas at the moment, and whether or not to offer him a fresh deal. Stoke have a decision to make on Nick Powell, and he's probably the most interesting player that they've got out of contract at the end of the season. He's not played that much football this season, relatively speaking, just 6 starts this season in the Championship, but in that time has scored 3 goals. I think Stoke fans know of all what you're getting, you know, in the Nick Powell package. On his day, very good, and one of the best creative assets probably to have in the Championship, but with that, you also get a lot of inconsistency, by the way, because he does sit a lot of the season out on the sidelines with injuries. He's out of contract at the end of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if they were to offer a sort of reduced terms basis on him, maybe. When it comes to Sunderland, I believe they're pretty set on contract renewals. The likes of Ross Stewart, Alex Pritchard and Danny Batt had all been set to expire at the end of the season, but all have automatic 1-year renewals in their deals, I'm led to believe. So as things stand, they're pretty fine at the moment. Preston North End, Daniel Johnson. Don't get me wrong, DJ's had a little bit of an inconsistent year, but I think the second half of the season has really come into form, and I truly believe that we are a much better side with him in there. We also, I think, will be quite hard pressed to replace the attributes he brings to our side. We are, you know, quite well stacked up in that midfield department, but in terms of creative midfielders who are capable of breaking lines with passes, DJ is the only real midfielder of quality that we've got in that select position. I definitely think we'd need to look at a wage reduction if we were to get him signed up on a new deal, but I certainly think that's something we should be exploring. Another player's definitely worth considering, Greg Cunningham. I think he's been really solid for us this season, but the fact he's now 32 and he's just picked up an injury, which means he'll be out for the remainder of the season, does make me a little bit wary, especially with his previous injury record. And Robbie Brady, another one worth considering. Watford have a fair few deals running out at the end of the season. Craig Cathcart, probably the most likely to be offered a new deal. He's featured in 26 matches this season. 34 years old, so it would be a short-term option. I'd imagine that the club would offer him, but out of him, Gosling and Cleverley, who are all out of contract, I think he's the most likely to receive one. Under Carlos Corberán, I think it's fair to say that Eric Peters has proven his worth at West Brom, and they've got a decision to make on his contract come the end of the season. Now, he is 34 years old, so certainly in his senior years, but given the consistent performances they've got out of him so far this season, there's definitely that conversation to be had with him at the end of the season regarding his future. Fankanti Dabo is an interesting one at Coventry, over 100 appearances for the club. Obviously played these last 3 years with them at Championship level after being part of that League One squad that was promoted. He is out of contract at the end of the season, but there is, from what I've seen, probably a little bit of debate within the Coventry fan base in terms of whether he has justified this next contract coming his way in the summer, or if it is time for them to go ahead and move him on. They do also have a few other fringe players who are out of contract in the summer as well, which they will be considering renewals for. Norwich City, gonna say Kieran Dowell. I'm fully aware that Timu Puki's also out of contract at the end of the season, but it feels like that natural separation may happen where it could be best for both Pukki and Norwich to sort of move on. Pukki get that move elsewhere, and Norwich look to rebuild their squad around some of their younger assets. Kieran Dowell is someone who I still think has a lot to offer in a Norwich City shirt. I think when utilised in the right position, he's capable of being one of the best creative outlets in the Championship, and along with Onel Hernandez, I'd say that those two in particular have earned new deals. Blackburn Rovers have a decision to make when it comes to Daniel Ayala, because when fit and available, I think a really dependable centre-half for Rovers. What could cost him in terms of a renewal is his most recent injury, which has left him on the sidelines, and with his advancing age as well, perhaps a reduction in wages may be necessary necessary, but I'd be particularly interested to get some Rovers fans' perspectives on that in terms of what you make of AYALA at the moment and whether or not you'd offer him fresh terms. From what I can tell, Millwall seem to be set on the contract front, but there's still a decision to be made when it comes to Mason Bennett, who is out of contract at the end of this season. He's a bit of a funny one, Bennett, in at Millwall, because certainly offers something, but along with some other players who we've mentioned in today's video, has also had his injury problems and has sort of been in and out of that Millwall squad. Obviously, Millwall did well to renew the 2 goalkeeping deals recently, and Bennett's one who I'm a bit 50-50 on whether or not he'll get a new deal. From a Luton perspective, there's absolutely no doubt that they need to tie Tom Lockyer down to a new deal. I think he's in the conversation right now to be a part of the Championship team of the season. I think his performances have been so consistent for Luton throughout this season. He's really stepped up this year in particular, and it would be a bitter pill for Luton fans to swallow to lose Lockyer on a free transfer just 1 year after they obviously lost Naismith last time. But Lockyer's been fantastic. If he was to leave, he certainly wouldn't be short of offers, but I think they need to be doing everything they can to get him down to a new deal. When it comes to Middlesbrough, I don't think this one's really applicable. I think they're fairly happy to move on those players who are out of contract. They obviously had that option for an extra year on Akpom, which they've already extended. Darnell Fisher is someone who's out of contract at the end of the season at Middlesbrough, but I can't for the life of me see them renewing his deal after he's been out injured throughout pretty much his entire stint there. Sheffield United, of course, I'm going for Ollie Norwood. I do believe the Blades have an option in his contract for an extra year, but Blades fans will have to fill me in on that on the specifics down below. There are a few players at the moment whose contracts are expiring come the end of the season, and I'm sure that those conversations will be had at Bramall Lane over these next few months. But speaking about the Championship team of the season before, I mean, Norwood at the moment I think is a shoe into that team. With how good and important he's been to this Blade side this season, definitely warrants a new deal. And then finishing things off with Burnley, whose only out of contract start at the end of the season seems to be Ashley Barnes. And Barnes, to be fair, has been a real useful player for Burnley under Vincent Kompany. I was a little bit sceptical about how he in particular would fit into this new brand of football, but I actually think he's done really quite well to adapt his game to the Championship. And I mean, consistently for Burnley he has scored goals, but in a Dyche system, playing in a Kompany system, it's very different things that are being asked of you as a number 9. Whether or not he will get a new deal with Burnley going up to the Premier League, that remains to be seen. But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. There was one player from every Championship club. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like and do get your thoughts down below. Stay subscribed for some regular Championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.